Hey everybody, Tom Barnes here, Stories from the 78. And my guest today, I'm super excited about. You might have read her work if you've taken a writing class in life, Janet Burroway. She has written many books, including Writing Fiction, A Guide to Narrative Craft. I mean, it's been a bestseller, 10 editions, 250,000 copies sold. It's basically like the textbook for any writing course that people take. She's also written 8 previous novels, a memoir, plays, short fiction, children's book. I mean, she's done it all. And she wrote this compelling new book. It is called Simone in Pieces, and it's a World War II refugee story about a woman reconnecting with her past, which has many parallels to what's going on here in the United States with all the ICE things happening and across the world with all the wars going on, people getting displaced. So very poignant and very topical. And she has a book signing coming up that we'll get to in a little bit. But I first welcome Janet to the show now. Janet, how are you?
Oh, introducing the book is difficult for me because I've spent so long working on it. It's the story of an immigrant
Hmm.
to America when she was welcomed to America as an immigrant, a different time than now. This is
Yeah.
after the Second World War, and she first goes to England, and then eventually, as a young woman, comes to America and eventually becomes an American citizen. And it travels with her from Belgium to England to a different part of England to a different part to New York and then to upstate New York and then to Missouri. So it in fact the biggest influence that Chicago has had on it is that it's given me time to write and that I have the most wonderful writing group. Rosellen is one of the groups.
Oh,
Um, and Sandy Weisenberg and Garnett Cohen, Kilberg Cohen, and we meet every other week, and they are enormously supportive and also very sharp in their criticism.
is it tough to hear some of that criticism even after? I mean, you've written something like 8 previous novels, you have a memoir, you've done plays, short fiction, children's books. Is it still terrifying to have somebody criticize work that you're working on?
I do not find it so. I like to have people critique it, and I think that I do have a sense of immediately I can't use that. Or, oh, I see. And often the I can't use that reaction is that kind of defensive moment. And then after a few days, I thought, oh, yeah, well, yeah, actually, that's probably right. So, no, I find it very useful to have a critique. It's also useful that the first person who always reads my stuff is my husband,
Hmm,
and he is not at all critical. And that's lovely.
I bet. Helps with the whole marriage thing.
It does. It does.
Tell me about the your group, your writers. Like, where is there a place that you meet? Is it a different place all the time? Tell me about that.
All the time. Before the pandemic, we always met at each other's houses, and there are 7 of us, and no, 8 of us now, and we do go to each other's houses. In fact, they came to my house just this past Sunday. Um, but since the pandemic, we have got into the habit of zooming. And
Hmm.
so if the weather's terrible, we Zoom, or if somebody has a very short amount of time that day, we can Zoom as well. It's
That's fun.
yeah,
And is
we spread all over um, from at least Lakeview, maybe north of Lakeview, to uh, University of Chicago.
oh yeah, down in Hyde Park. Yeah, that's a huge swath of that's a big area.
It's a big area.
And getting into this, the novel about, World War II, you mentioned earlier that she was a welcome immigrant here in the United States, which the parallels, I mean, wow, of what's
Yeah,
going on. I
yeah,
imagine
very
with
different.
everything that's gone on in the last few months here in the Chicago and our country for that matter, it seems very timely, in a way where we can be reminded of yeah, it reminded of how we used to do things versus how we are, regardless of how we got here, we're doing it a certain way that we didn't do as a country before.
Absolutely. And when I started the book, I didn't think in those terms. I was interested in, well, I've been married to two immigrants from the Second World War. So one from Belgium and one from Hungary. And there are immigrants, though they're very different people, from Belgium and from Hungary. And I felt that I could write about these people because I knew their experiences very well from them, but especially from both of my mothers-in-law, who were
Hmm.
very, very forthcoming with what they had been through and what it had been like to come to America from the Second World War. Um, there are three immigrant characters in the book. And the second pair are a husband and wife who have come after the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. So they come much later,
Hmm.
but also welcomed. In a way, that situation is a little different because the Hungarian Revolution believed that America would come to their aid, which we didn't. And I think America felt very guilty about that, and so allowed these people who had to flee from their communist overlords,
Hmm.
and were allowed. A lot of them were allowed just uh, with great ease into America.
Yeah, it seems now America has a giant mirror in front of its face when we're asking ourselves, is this who we really are? That's
Yeah.
kind of the tone it feels like right now. I mean, was there a specific story that popped out when you were diving down into this overall story that you have written here that stands out, or was it hard to get into that mindset? I know you said you had some people that you leaned on from practical life experience. Is there something that popped out that you'd like to share?
Well, yes, the way this book began was very strange. A very long time ago, um, late 90s, I wrote a
Really?
short story which was meant to be a satire of an English department meeting. And it was funny, and it was full of people who were named after kinds of criticism. So there was a dean named Riddick, and his nickname was Nuke. So he was New Criticism. And a bunch of those, a couple of which have uh, made their way into the novel. But um, as I was writing this story, which I was having a good time going along with the satire of the department meeting, suddenly it took a very hard turn into grief with the memory of the old woman who was speaking. And I had no idea that was going to happen. I love it when my characters surprise me, but this was a big surprise. And I realized that I couldn't really finish the story until I knew that woman's life story. So I sat down and did it. And when I
Wow.
ran through the story for my husband, he said, "That's your next book." Well, it wasn't my next book. There were many books in between. But I did find that I kept coming back to this woman, coming back to exploring her. And each time I heard some different voice. Um, I began the novel when I knew it was a novel that I was starting with a memory of her being on the boat that rescued her from Belgium, actually during the war. And it wasn't right, and it wasn't right. And I wrote reams of paper on this, trying to make it right. And then it occurred to me, she can't tell this story because she doesn't know it. She doesn't remember what happened on that traumatic night. And so then I put it in the in the voice of a woman who had put a blanket around her and talked about her.
Hmm.
And then I had to figure out, why is the woman telling this story? Oh, they're interviewing her for a BBC documentary about women of World War II. And then each time I came back to write about her, it seemed to be in a different voice. And eventually I realized that I had to put together who she was with different voices, because she had to put together who she was. And it was these encounters that gradually brought her memory back.
Is that typical of how you develop characters, or is that very specific to this novel?
Very specific to this novel. Very specific to it. The thing that is, I think, a constant in my writing is that I begin with a situation or an experience, and I see some people that are having this experience, and I start writing about it. And I may keep writing about it for a long time before I really know what it's about. And I only learn what it's about when I see a metaphor that recurs and that seems to encapsulate this experience. So, for example, I wrote a novel called Cutting Stone that was about the experience of a young couple who had to go from Baltimore to Arizona in 1915 because he had tuberculosis. And the beginning of the novel was, it took 114 bottles of champagne to see the young Poindexters off to Arizona. And a couple of pages later, one character asked another, why would they go out to that godforsaken place? And the young woman who answered her answered, I think it is a matter of consumption. I wrote for a year and a half, 150 pages, before I saw the connection between 114 bottles of champagne and consumption. And then I saw that what I was writing about was hunger and thirst. And it meant alcoholism, but it also meant spiritual thirst. And the desire to dig up the earth to get copper and marble out of it. And then I understood what I was writing about. And that metaphor of thirst and hunger goes throughout that novel. Well, in this one, when I understood that I could only tell her story through a lot of different voices until she could speak for herself, which she eventually does,
Mm-hmm.
that it was all in pieces. These are pieces that
So it sounds like something pops into your head for an idea, and you just write about it, and you don't even know where it's going. You just write, and so you have just write until eventually it speaks to you of what you're writing about.
Yeah, and I think some good storytellers are lucky enough that they know what the plot is when they start. I never know what the plot is when I
Never?
start. Never. No.
Is that frustrating to you, or is it just is it just matter
It's
of almost?
frustrating to me in the sense that people who know how to give you a hook and make you anticipate what's going to happen sell more copies of books. You have to be patient with me because it will all make sense. But it only made sense gradually to me, so it'll only make sense gradually to you.
It's just funny to hear you say that. I mean, you are kind of like the authority on writing fiction. You have a book that has sold many thousands and thousands of copies. A
And I
guide
tell
to
people
narrative.
about a plot. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I imagine it really allows you though to get um vulnerable and really feel it, it's like people say, like you lean into it, like, because there's no roadmap, so you can lean into it, not because you're not apprehensive of where you're going, you just know that you need to do it.
I think your word vulnerable is very accurate. I feel very vulnerable. When I sit down and write a page, I usually think, oh, that's really horrible. That's just awful. And the next day I sit down and I see something in there that I can use. And then I worry about that for a few hours and try to write about it. but it comes very slowly for me. You know, I'm not one of those writers who's going to end up with 75 books.
How
20,
long does
but
it?
not 75.
Yeah, but it's about quality, not quantity, as they say, right?
Yeah, 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 it is.
Does it frustrate you though, when you're writing? Like, I imagine you get to in a groove at some point where you're writing, and you're in the groove, but you're like, I still don't know where the heck I'm going, but I don't want to lose this groove. Is it just reminding yourself like you just got to go with it? You just got to go, like it will reveal itself.
Yes and no. By the time I feel the groove, I have a sense of where I'm headed.
Got it.
So that's probably more comfortable. It doesn't mean every day's writing is going to be more comfortable. It isn't. It's always difficult. There are always many versions of everything. But it does sometimes just occur to me, as it did with this book. Oh, I see. That's the point. That's where I'm headed.
Were you what's your favorite part of the character that you're speaking about in this book?
Oh, I guess it is. Oh boy, that's a difficult question. I guess it is when she finally connects with her memory. And yes, yes. My favorite part is a chapter in which she's sitting with two friends in a little cafe in Missouri, and one of the friends says, "My mother used to have," and hesitates, and she thinks, what do people's mother used to have? What can I say my mother used to have? And then she starts thinking about what her mother used to have. And the current scene continues, but so does her memory. And each memory begins with my mother used to have.
Hmm, that's
Actually,
wonderful.
that was a gift from uh, Ford. Um, I was on a panel once with now I'm blanking on his name. I think it's Tom Ford. Is that who I mean? Um,
We'll go with it.
I can go with it. And,
Mr. Ford, how
and
about that?
Mr. Ford and Mr. Ford said that he kept ideas on little scraps of paper that he stuck under his bed, and then in the morning he would pull one out and think about it. And he said, "This morning I pulled out a scrap that said my mother used to have." And I thought, what did my mother used to have? And you could hear the whole audience going, "Ah, what a wonderful idea!" And I'm sure there were more pages that were written than mine.
Oh, I
So,
bet. And, and you mentioned, trauma being a big part of this particular story and how trauma affects people. Because I feel like even now we're just starting to really understand what trauma does to a person, to their brain at specific times in their, a younger kid handles trauma differently than an adult, but the
yeah.
trauma as a child can affect you so much as an adult, and it's just, I imagine that gives you a huge palette to take the story from one spot to another based on the trauma that comes to mind. Is that drawing just because it makes sense for that character, or is there any of that trauma out there that you've heard about or experienced on your own?
Well, I have experienced a good deal of it, yes, with the death of my older son. And that is an experience I had never thought about connecting that to Simone, but it must be true that it does. And I
Hmm.
also think about it in general about what we're doing to the children that are separated from their parents, both here and in Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's a traumatized generation. Actually, I've just finished Gish Chen's wonderful novel, Bad Bad Girl.
Hmm.
And one of the things that she writes very lightly, and it's an easy read, a fun read. Nevertheless, what she's talking about is her mother's going through the Second World War and the aftermath, and then how that trauma takes generations to dilute.
Hmm.
what we're now calling intergenerational trauma. And
Yeah.
it does. I know other people for whom that's true from that
Yeah, I mean,
regard.
trauma can devastate an entire family story, from how people deal with it to who it affected, that drama is from. It really is something it's a common theme when I talk to authors and they have trauma in their story and how they use it, because it's just so it's fascinating how trauma can affect so many people outside of the immediate people that it affected, because like you said, that generational trauma that continues, like a grandchild, getting some sort of trauma from a great grandparent that was passed down, they didn't even know it, but just based on the behavior that was set forth throughout their family.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. Well,
Wow, man.
that's
You're
one of the Hungarian characters makes that observation in my book, and Gish Jen's book is all about
wonderful
it.
storytelling nonetheless. In the new book Simone in Pieces, it just came out on Tuesday of this week, but you have a big uh, book launch celebration here in Chicago on the 12th at 7 o'clock. Women and Children First, the bookstore right at 52nd Clark Street. There we go, in Andersonville.
Right.
5200 North is what I was trying to get at there. Janet, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I wish you nothing but the best in the book launch, and maybe one day you'll have one of these novels pop out that comes out pretty quick. It might surprise yourself,
That would be nice.
right?
Thanks so much, Tom.